Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a masterclass in corporate rescue on a massive scale.
That's right.
We're diving deep into the incredible story of Lou Gerstner's transformation of IBM. It's honestly one of the greatest turnarounds in business history, maybe one of the riskiest, too.
Oh, definitely. It's a real case study in leadership, isn't it? We're calling this one The Elephant Learns to Dance.
Yay!
Because, back in 1993, IBM wasn't just sick, it was collapsing.
Yeah.
Utterly collapsing.
Right.
You had this huge, sprawling, decentralized, giant, the ultimate blue chip company, right?
Like definition of it.
And it was basically staring bankruptcy in the face. So Gerstner comes in, an outsider, no tech background.
Which was a huge deal at the time.
Massive. And he takes on this, frankly, impossible task. Turn this behemoth into something nimble, something sustainable. And he did it over 9 really turbulent years.
So that's our mission today, right? To
Yeah.
figure out how he pulled it off. This deep dive is sort of a shortcut, trying to distill the key insights from Gerstner's own account, plus all the analysis that came after. We really want to focus on the cultural problems he found.
Pathologies, yeah.
And the pretty radical changes he had to make to the whole system to flip that script. Because this wasn't just, tweaking a business model.
No, not at all.
It was changing the company's DNA, the culture itself.
Absolutely. And we got to start at the bottom. The sources, they describe IBM in 93 as being in a precipitous collapse. Billions hemorrhaging. The existing structure was actually making things worse, speeding up the decline.
Wow.
So before Gerstner could even think about strategy, he had to diagnose and treat these really deep cultural dysfunctions, the things that were poisoning the whole place.
Okay, so Gerstner arrives. He's the outsider stepping into this. IBM was almost like a religion, right? This revered corporate environment. What was the core sickness he spotted right away? The thing paralyzing everyone?
Well, his big discovery, the core thing, was this pervasive, really profound internal focus.
Internal focus.
Yeah, picture it. IBM's losing market share like crazy, right?
Yeah.
But inside the company, the attitude was basically that anything outside, customers, competitors, market shifts, that stuff was secondary.
Secondary to what?
To what counted inside. Promotions, internal meetings, endless meetings, departmental budgets. That's what drove people day to day. The whole organization was navel-gazing while the market was just eating them alive.
That level of insularity, it must have created some weird behaviors, right? Things that an outsider would immediately notice as strange. Any specific words or rituals he picked up on?
Oh, yeah. He flagged one specific, uniquely IBM term, pushback.
Pushback, okay.
He said it was used constantly. And not in the good way, like healthy disagreement. No.
How then?
It was used as if decisions from leadership, even big, high-stakes decisions made years before, were just, meant to be suggestions.
Seriously, suggestions.
Yeah. IBMers felt totally entitled to push back, to fight, to undermine decisions long after they were supposedly settled. Even while the company was sinking, they were still fighting battles from years ago.
That just sounds exhausting and incredibly paralyzing if you need fast, unified action.
Totally.
If you've got thousands of people actively fighting decisions from 2 years ago, that suggests the problem isn't just resisting change, it's something deeper, right? Like a lack of loyalty to the mission.
Absolutely. And the sources point right to that underlying cause. Too many IBMers fought change if it was not in their personal interest.
Ah, there it is.
It wasn't about, is this good for IBM? It was, does this reduce my turf? Does it threaten my budget? Does it change my comfortable routine? This wasn't healthy debate. It was pure self-interest dressed up as, due diligence.
And this collective apathy, this resistance rooted in self-preservation. It must have shown up most clearly in just a total breakdown of execution, right? We always hear execution is the hard part. But what were the specific symptoms Gerstner saw?
Yeah, the frustration he ran into came from what he called the organization's apparently endless tolerance for failure to execute.
Endless tolerance for failure. Ouch.
Yeah. Think about the day-to-day management. Gerstner saw managers who just didn't demand implementation. They didn't follow up. They'd give orders, maybe, but not track progress.
So no accountability.
None. Deadlines.
Yeah.
Often not even set. Or if they were, nobody cared when they were missed. Zero accountability.
Yeah.
It was just this vast, polite machine that agreed to everything in meetings.
Right.
And then went off and quietly did nothing.
That is the classic corporate disease, isn't it? Inaction, pretending to be effort.
Exactly.
The ultimate bureaucratic CYA. Well, we formed a task force.
And then they formed a task force. You got it. It feels like movement, feels like effort, but it's just spinning wheels to avoid actually doing anything or taking responsibility.
Precisely. And if we connect that to like the deeper models of how organizations work, this failure to execute, it comes from a lack of real commitment, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Genuine commitment is born out of healthy conflict.
Yeah.
If people on a team don't feel safe enough to really air their true opinions, to have that tough debate,
Then they just nod along in the meeting.
exactly. They feign agreement
Yeah.
and they walk out. They don't really have buy-in. They definitely don't have commitment. And they're certainly not going to call out a colleague who's doing something counterproductive.
So the inability to have that necessary conflict in the meeting kills accountability outside the meeting. It's a vicious cycle. Politeness literally kills performance.
And that leads straight to a low-trust climate, when the whole management vibe feels arbitrary, when people fear, arbitrary action, favoritism, discrimination.
Yeah.
What do?
They demand rules, rigid rule.
Exactly. They start craving rigid policies, formal rules as protection.
Yeah.
They want rules because they don't trust the judgment or the fairness of the leaders.
That makes sense why you'd see a shift towards things like seniority-based promotions, even if it's terrible for a tech company. If I think my boss is just playing favorites, I'd rather have a rigid rule, like promote based on time served. Even if it's inefficient, a rule feels safer than trusting a person I don't trust.
Precisely. Rigid rules, like seniority systems, they become the workforce's shield against what they see as unfairness. They end up trading organizational agility for their own personal sense of security.
But that demand for rigidity is the exact opposite of what IBM needed in the 90s, right? They needed speed, meritocracy, adaptation.
Totally. Gerstner had to break that whole pathology, and he had to do it by somehow restoring trust in leadership itself.
That idea of arbitrary treatment leading to demands for rigid structure, it's not just corporate. You see it throughout history.
Yeah.
Frederick Douglass wrote about it with slaveholders. He found the religious ones often the most arbitrary and cruel. You couldn't even count on getting enough food consistently. When people face constant arbitrary actions, they lose all trust in the system and they'll grab onto any formal structure, a policy, a rule, anything to replace that trust.
That's a powerful parallel.
So Gerstner had to bring in meritocracy, but do it in a way that didn't feel arbitrary itself.
And that was the tightrope he had to walk in the next phase, proving the new merit system was actually fair, not just a different kind of favoritism.
Okay, so he's diagnosed the sick culture. Now, conventional wisdom in turnarounds, especially back then, was basically fire everybody, bring in your own team, clean house.
Right, the slash and burn approach.
But Gerstner did something totally different and really risky. He went with what you called the anti-outsider strategy.
Yeah, it was a really fascinating break from the standard playbook. Gerstner often said his proudest accomplishment was that when he retired, his successor and all the major unit heads were longtime IBMers.
Not outsiders he brought in.
Nope, not imported talent. He specifically chose not to do that big wave of external hiring that you saw in other turnarounds happening around the same time.
Well, wasn't Wall Street screaming for him to do exactly that? Bring in a chainsaw Al type, someone known for ruthless cuts and bringing in their own people?
Oh, absolutely. The pressure was immense. But his reasoning was critical. He argued it would have been naive, as well as dangerous, to try and parachute outsiders into a structure as vast and complex as IBM.
Why dangerous?
He recognized the company was actually, quote, brimming with talented people who had unique expertise. They knew the complex systems, the global clients, the tech history. The raw talent wasn't the problem.
It was the system they were stuck in.
Exactly. It was the context, the culture, the systems they were operating under. His goal was to give those internal players a chance, but under new rules.
Yeah.
Merit-based rules. He basically trusted the talent, just not the old system.
That still sounds incredibly risky. If the culture is full of internal focus and self-interest, how do you figure out who's part of the problem and who's just, a victim of that broken system?
He had to judge based on behavior under the new pressures, not just how long they'd been there. And this is where his focus really shifted to prioritizing people over abstract ideas.
Okay.
It lines up perfectly with what we saw in other successful companies, like Circuit City back in the day. Alan Wurtzel was obsessed with building the best, most professional management team in the industry. Made sure even the delivery drivers met high standards. That relentless focus on people paid off massively. It proved that the capability of the people actually doing these strategy often matters more than the theoretical genius of the strategy itself.
Which brings us to that core creative leadership idea Gerstner seemed to embrace. The answer to that classic business question, what's more valuable, good ideas or good people?
And the answer, Gerstner believed, is always the people.
Yeah.
Always. Because, as the sources point out, ideas aren't just these bolts from the blue. They get forged through literally tens of thousands of little decisions made by dozens, hundreds of people across an organization. You can have a brilliant strategy on paper, but if you don't have the people who can adapt it, debate it, execute it down to the smallest detail, it's worthless. It failed.
Yeah, so the focus has to shift. Stop chasing the silver bullet idea.
Right.
And start cultivating the talent pool.
Precisely. The goal isn't finding the one magic idea to save IBM. The real goal for management should be find, develop, and support good people. And they, in turn, will find, develop, and own good ideas. You focus on the people, their habits, their talents, their values. That's central to any success, especially a massive turnaround like this.
Okay.
Gerstner had to commit to finding and promoting the IBMers inside, who showed that external focus, that high accountability, and then give them the tools and the systems where they could actually succeed.
And changing that entrenched culture of, entitlement and self-interest, that requires a very specific kind of leadership, right? What the sources call multiplier leadership.
Yeah, exactly. Leaders have to be intelligence. Multipliers. These are the people who amplify the smarts, the capability, the energy of everyone around them.
They make the team smarter.
Yeah. They create environments where the collective brain power is way greater than just the sum of the parts. And this is the total opposite of the diminisher.
The diminisher. That's the classic micromanager, right?
Pretty much. The diminisher holds onto ownership of every little detail. They only delegate tiny piecemeal tasks like, okay, you solve this little square, but don't you dare look at the whole puzzle.
Right. No real responsibility.
None. And that creates those awful corporate bottlenecks, those idle cycles where highly paid smart staff are just sitting around waiting for the leader to make some tiny decision. It makes talented people ineffective.
You're paying top dollar for brains, but their actual contribution gets choked off by a leader who's too afraid or too insecure to let go of control.
And that highlights the final piece here, the need for emotional maturity in leadership. There's this concept, the law of empowerment, which says only secure leaders give power to others.
Secure leaders give power. Okay.
For Gerstner to actually empower those longtime IBMers, he had to be secure enough himself. Secure enough not to be threatened by their intelligence or their capability, or even by the mistakes they might make while learning to take full ownership.
That security also dictates whether you can handle real criticism, real healthy conflict, right?
Absolutely.
We saw that, maybe surprisingly, even with someone like Steve Jobs. Despite his intense reputation,
Right.
he actually agreed not to attend Pixar's famous brain trust meetings.
Yeah. Why? Because he knew his own bigger-than-life presence would make it harder for people to be candid. Sometimes the highest-ranking person, whether it's Gerstner at IBM or Jobs at Pixar, has to be secure enough to step back, or at least consciously temper their influence, if their mere presence shuts down the free flow of ideas. That honest, high-stakes debate is crucial to finding the best path.
So true candor has to trump hierarchy.
Always, if you want the best outcome.
All right, turning around a company the size of IBM. It's not a quick fix. It's a marathon, a real slog. Gerstner had to fight that human tendency to kind of relax once the immediate burning crisis seems to pass. How did he keep that sense of urgency going without totally burning everyone out?
Yeah, that's a key challenge. He made a very conscious, very strategic choice. Not to declare victory too early. He deliberately avoided, as he put it, putting on a happy face or declaring the turnaround over as soon as possible.
Why not? Wouldn't people want some good news?
They right, but he understood something critical. The memory of the collapse, the pain of those near-death years, that was actually their greatest ally in shaking off the old bad habits and speeding up the changes they still needed to make.
So he kept the crisis front and center, as the sources say, but without constantly yelling, fire! How do you balance that? You can't just keep telling people they're failing.
Right. You need progress, too. And that leads to the second really critical move he made. Confronting the painful reality of accountability, but reframing the pain itself.
Reframing the pain. How?
Okay, so IBM had lost something like 125,000 jobs, a staggering number. Instead of letting people explain that away as, just bad luck or unavoidable market forces.
The act of God defense?
Exactly. Gerstner delivered this really stark message. He basically asked who did it to them. Was it an act of God? No. These guys came in and beat us.
Wow. direct.
Very direct.
Yeah.
That reframing is absolutely essential. He shifted the whole narrative away from IBM being an innocent victim
Right.
to recognizing that losing all that market share. That happened because external competitors were plotting very carefully to rip away our business.
And that changes the psychology completely, doesn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
When people feel like innocent victims, what do? They get defensive, they look inward, they dodge responsibility. Gerstner forced accountability. We messed up, we failed to adapt, we got beaten,
Yeah.
but crucially, he gave that pain an external target.
The competitive.
Right. The fault wasn't some internal moral failing, it was competitive failure. The team needed to stop defending its past and start fighting the real enemy outside with grit and determination.
Okay, but determination isn't enough if the internal systems are still rewarding the wrong things, right? Gerstner saw that these problems were often systemic. You can't just give speeches and expect the culture to change.
Absolutely right. Executives try it all the time, right? They try to buy a new culture with inspiring speeches, maybe a new mission statement plaque on the wall.
Yeah.
But they totally ignore the low-trust climate and, more importantly, the systems, compensation, promotions, budgets, that are still rewarding internal competition and silo thinking.
So to get to a real win-win culture where cooperation actually matters?
The entire system has to reinforce it. Compensation, planning, training, how resources get allocated,
Yeah.
all of it has to push cooperation, not internal competition.
And there's that fantastic example of a systemic fix where a problem that seemed impossible was fixed almost overnight just by changing the compensation. Can you walk us through that again?
Yeah, this specific example, it was about a company dealing with really bad sales behavior. Fighting over territories, managers hoarding the best accounts, that kind of thing.
Standard stuff, unfortunately.
Right. And they realized, more training or pep talks weren't going to cut it because the system was rewarding the bad behavior. Managers were focused only on hitting their personal quota or maximizing their own division's sales, even if it hurt another division.
Okay, so what was the magic fix? The systemic change.
They changed the compensation rules so that managers only made good money when their entire team, including salespeople they barely interacted with, sometimes made money.
Ah, okay.
Critically, they tied the manager's bonus directly to the total revenue generated by every single person in their territory or unit.
Sure.
Not just their own deals, not just their little silo.
So it created instant mutual dependency.
Exactly.
Oh.
Overnight, managers had a direct financial incentive to coach everyone, to collaborate across boundaries, to support the entire organization's sales effort. My success suddenly depended directly on your success.
And that overlap of needs and goals, it fixes the behavior without needing another meeting or motivational poster. It aligns self-interest with the organization's interest, pure systems thinking.
It's about coherence, getting all the signals aligned, and this commitment to accountability, it has to run all the way up and down the chain of command, which brings us to that military concept you mentioned, extreme ownership.
Right. The idea that even if you disagree internally, once the decision is made, you execute it like it was your own.
Precisely. Leadership is a team sport. Fierce debate before the decision, absolutely essential. You got to test the ideas. But once the boss makes the final call, the subordinate leader must execute the plan as if it were your own.
Present a united front.
Always. To the troops, it has to look unified. Because any public sign of disagreement, even just a sigh or rolling your eyes in a meeting after the decision, it undermines the boss's authority and confuses the hell out of everyone down the line. It degrades the whole chain of command.
And there was that historical example too, right? From ancient Greece. Shows this isn't just a modern business problem.
Yeah, the Athenian general fighting the Carthaginians. His own army pressured him to attack immediately. Against his better judgment, he eventually gave in.
Then a result.
Chaos. They won the battle, but the soldiers immediately started looting the captured city, using torches, burning down the very houses the general wanted to preserve. They won, but lost control because the general didn't have the discipline to enforce his own better plan. Lack of a unified discipline front turned victory into a mess.
So Gerstner had to ensure that once IBM made a big systemic decision like shifting strategy or changing compensation, the entire organization executed it with total conviction. No daylight between leaders.
Exactly. That unity was crucial.
Okay, so Gerstner's tackled the culture, he's empowered the right people, he's rebuilt accountability and trust through systemic changes. The last huge piece of the puzzle is setting the direction, right? IBM had to figure out where it fit in the future economy. That meant a massive strategic pivot.
A massive pivot, yes. Gerstner focused on this fundamental shift happening everywhere. the need for a fundamentally new kind of information infrastructure. Everything was being driven by the sheer ubiquity of computing. The PC had spread computing power out.
Decentralized it.
Right. But now the world needed to connect all those scattered pieces back together.
And this is where he made his huge strategic bet. He basically coined the term that defined the next decade of business, didn't he?
He really did. He essentially invented and championed the whole concept of e-business. He positioned IBM not just as a hardware maker or software seller, but as the architect, the systems integrator for this incredibly complex, interconnected new world.
Okay.
This new environment, it was defined by way more devices, massive floods of data, and constantly escalating security threats. IBM's new game wasn't just selling boxes or small software packages. It was making all these different systems globally talk to each other securely and efficiently.
That's a huge shift. And that kind of strategic pivot, dealing with that level of complexity, the sources suggest it required IBM to accept a really counterintuitive trade-off.
Yes, and this is so important. In a world that's rapidly changing, complex, and interconnected, focusing only on efficiency often comes at the direct cost of adaptability.
Efficiency versus adaptability, okay?
Traditional business thinking is all about streamlining. Cut the fat, maximize throughput, make everything lean and mean for maximum efficiency.
Right.
But when the market is constantly shifting and everything's interdependent, those super rigid, streamlined structures and silos, they become brittle. They're really efficient at doing the one thing they were designed for, but they absolutely cannot pivot when things change.
That's the difference between being robust and being resilient, isn't it? The old IBM was robust, huge resources, solid structures, but it wasn't resilient when the environment changed underneath it.
Exactly. You know, the military task force analysis found the same thing in their own operations. Their traditional, rigid, top-down structure with vertical silos, it was super efficient for decades of Cold War planning.
Sure.
But when they suddenly faced counterinsurgency operations requiring instant, seamless coordination across multiple agencies, different branches, even non-military groups, they realized they didn't have an efficiency problem. They had an adaptability problem. Management systems have to move beyond just chasing efficiency. They have to build in flexibility, adaptability, if they want to survive in these complex, dynamic ecosystems.
And that flexibility, it requires a different view of organizational balance, right?
Yeah.
Not static, but dynamic. We tend to think of balance as like that perfectly still yogi on one leg.
Right. Absolute stillness. But that's not what healthy, adaptive organizations look like.
What's a better model?
Think about dynamic systems in motion. A great basketball player spinning around a defender, constantly adjusting. Or a surfer riding a huge wave, making thousands of tiny adjustments to stay upright.
Constant motion, constant response.
Exactly. Organizational balance needs to be seen like that. An active, continuous process of adapting and responding, not some final, perfect, static state you achieve and then hold.
And that dynamic balance, that adaptation, it actually thrives on conflict rather than trying to eliminate it. That seems counterintuitive too.
It does, but it's crucial. The goal shouldn't be zero conflict. Brad Bird from Pixar put it perfectly. He said, to view lack of conflict as optimum is like saying a sunny day is optimum.
Okay.
A sunny day is when the sun wins out over the rain. But if every day is sunny and it doesn't rain, things don't grow.
Yeah.
You need the storms, the challenges, the friction to foster growth.
So conflict, as long as it's healthy conflict.
Yes, healthy conflict.
It's essential because it pressure tests ideas. It ensures the best ones actually survive rigorous debate and scrutiny.
And this loops right back to where we were talking about leadership and empowerment. Management's real job isn't to stop the fighting. It's to make sure the conflict is seen as healthy, as a productive way to stress test ideas so the best ones win, regardless of who proposed them. Hierarchy shouldn't matter as much as the merit of the idea.
Like the Pixar brain trust model again, where any idea, no matter who brings it, gets subjected to really tough, honest criticism.
Exactly. That model shows that even in a huge organization, the truth, the best idea, has to be allowed to win out over rank or title. Gerstner had to instill that belief. Internal disagreement done right is a sign of health. As long as once a decision is made, everyone locks arms and executes flawlessly together.
It's fascinating, really, whether you're turning around a global tech giant like IBM into an e-business leader or you're directing an animated movie. Success seems to boil down to the same core things: empowering your people, fostering candid, high-stakes debate, and then achieving unified, systemic commitment to executing brilliantly. #tag outro. So this whole story, the elephant learns to dance. It really is a masterpiece of change management, isn't it? Gerstner brings IBM back from the brink, and not by following the usual playbook of mass layoffs and bringing in outsiders.
Right.
Instead, he keeps the crisis feeling urgent. He empowers and actually trusts the internal talent who had that unique IBM expertise. And crucially, he fixes the underlying corporate systems,
Yeah.
especially compensation and accountability, making them reward cooperation, not silos.
And then the final strategic masterstroke.
Yeah.
Adapting IBM to the new complex world by championing e-business and embracing adaptability, even if it meant sacrificing some old-school efficiency.
Yeah.
And, if we just step back for a second and think about how incredibly hard all that must have been.
Years of painful change.
Exactly. Years of pain, massive systems overhauls, constant high stakes, debates, and decisions. We're talking about enormous collective struggle. People had to work harder than ever, accept huge uncertainty, fundamentally change how they behaved for years.
You can only sustain that level of effort if you believe the pain is worthwhile, right? If it has meaning.
Precisely. Which brings us to that ultimate question of meaning in any transformation.
Viktor Frankl territory.
Exactly. Frankl, the psychologist who survived the Holocaust, he argued that the primary human drive isn't really seeking pleasure or avoiding pain. It's the search for meaning in life.
Okay.
And he found that humans are remarkably ready to suffer, even endure terrible hardship, if they are convinced that their suffering has meaning. Gerstner didn't just sell IBM a new business plan. He gave them a narrative. A painful one, yes, but a deeply meaningful one.
What was the narrative?
The narrative was, you weren't just victims of bad luck or some act of God. You were beaten by smart, determined competitors. And the struggle you're going through now, that's about fighting back, reclaiming your pride, your dignity, saving this iconic institution that you love.
So the external enemy gave the internal struggle purpose, meaning.
Exactly. So if you, listening right now, are going through a really tough transformation in your own career or your life, or just facing immense professional struggle, here's the final provocative thought we want to leave you with, inspired by Gerstner's IBM journey.
Okay.
What meaning are you currently giving to the struggles you're facing? Is it a meaning that fuels determination, that justifies the effort, that fosters long-term commitment like fighting a tough competitor to win background? Or is the story you tell yourself one that leaves you feeling like an innocent defensive victim of forces beyond your control?
Because that difference in meaning.
That difference might determine whether your own elephant ever learns to dance.